Hey guys, so new lesson, new day. Let's go ahead and let's get started with Chapter 7, Lesson 5. Looks like this is going to be kind of our new norm now as far as taking notes, so doing through videos. So make sure you're doing a good job at home, getting your notes down and getting them into your notebook. It's going to be the best way to study for any tests or quizzes. And if you do have a test or quiz and I see you can use your notes on them, you've got them right here. You don't have to go back and try and search through videos. So get these down. Be responsible about it. I know every one of you can do a great job with it. We have a short section today. I'm going to kind of go through this. Only 3 questions. So stay with me, but we're going to go kind of quick with it. Let's get busy. So our lesson today is outcomes of compound events. So we're still working with probability. So again, probability of flipping a coin. Options are heads and tails. Probability of heads, 50%. It's 1 over 2. I think we're all kind of on the same page with that. We're looking at compound events today. So a compound event is where we have 2 or more events happening at one time. So maybe you were to roll 2 dice. Maybe like you're playing Monopoly. You roll 2 dice out there. Maybe you take and you flip 2 coins at the same time. Maybe you spin 2 spinners. There's a lot of different possibilities out there, but again, we're just looking for when you're doing 2 things simultaneously. So let's look at number 1. A quarter is flipped 2 times. So I've got this coin, this quarter, it's flipped twice. The first thing that we're going to make is a tree diagram. So this will be the first type of way we can show the different outcomes in a compound event. There's 3 different ways we can show it, and the first is with a tree diagram. Hence, that's why we have 3 problems to show each one of these. So with a tree diagram, I want to kind of branch off all the different options. Hint, branch, and a tree diagram kind of go hand in hand. So the first coin that I flip, we'll say quarter 1. When you make your tree diagrams, guys, make sure they're labeled and make sure that you keep your work organized. When you flip quarter 1, you have a possibility of getting heads. You also have a possibility of getting tails. Gosh, I really miss having you guys because I can't even ask you guys questions in person as far as where to go from here. But anyhow, I flip my first coin. I can go heads or tails. I've got 2 outcomes. Now, with this problem, I'm flipping 2 quarters. So, when I flip it the first time and I get heads or tails, now when I flip it the second time, I have a possibility of going, after I flip heads, I could flip heads again, or I could flip tails. Say I were to have flipped tails the first time. Well, the next time I flip the quarter, I could also have the possibility of flipping on heads or flipping on tails. So this is my tree diagram. So how many different outcomes did I have? Well, when you count these up, you count the last row. So there is 4 outcomes. And those outcomes are, we can list them in our sample space. And remember, our sample space has all the different outcomes in it. Our sample space for this would include heads, heads. So if I flipped the heads and got heads again, or if I flipped heads and tails, my next outcome would be tails with the heads, or my final outcome would be tails and tails. So those are my 4 different outcomes that are possible with this scenario, if a quarter were to be flipped twice. Now, maybe the instructions got changed and it said it was flipped 3 times. Well, then you would just add your next set of branches off of every one of your last outcomes. And that would then make your outcomes also go up as well. But this is what a tree diagram would look like. You're branching off of each of your outcomes from the previous row. So tree diagram. Our next option that we have, number 2, I've got 2 spinners. And please don't laugh at my art. I think we all know from class I'm not the best artist. But you've got 2 spinners. Your first spinner has 6 different sections to it. And they're labeled 1 through 6. Your next spinner has 6 sections, and this time they're labeled A through F. This type of method, guys, is called a table. Now, personally, I like the table the best because it lays out all your outcomes. However, tables also can create the most work. So anytime I have a compound event, I want to list out my first set of outcomes. So from my first spinner, I could list out all 6 of my outcomes. So I'm going to list them out 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. And notice how they're all spread out. Next, I'm going to list out the rest of my outcomes on my second spinner. This time, I'm going to list these out going up and down. So A, B, C, D, E, and F. And now, I'm just going to compare my rows with my columns. So my first set here, if I go across, I have A, 1. My next row would be A, 2. The next one would be A, 3, and so forth, and this would continue for the rest of the table. So there's my first row. Now, if I were to go down, it would be B, 1, or C, C, 1, or D1, or even E1 or F1. So the table, guys, becomes very repetitive, and as you can see, there's a lot of work because there's a lot of pieces to fill in. However, by doing this, while I'm talking, I'm going to go ahead and fill the rest of this in. By doing this, you have your sample space. So I have all my options and all my different outcomes in front of me. I don't have to worry about creating a tree diagram like above and then listing out the sample space. Because in my table, this is my sample space. My table has all my different outcomes in it. Now, above, we listed that with those quarters, there was 4 outcomes. And we counted the bottom row, and that told us how many different outcomes we had. With my table, we can simply count again, and that will tell us how many different outcomes that we have. So for those that are doing your notes at home, hopefully you're about to finish your table just like I am. Let me get this last row finished. Alright, so it's possible that when you spin these 2 spinners, maybe you had a B on one and a 2 on the other. Or maybe it's possible you had an E on one, a 4 on the other. Maybe you had an F on one and 2 on the other. So these are all your different outcomes. To find the total number of outcomes, just go through your table, add everything up. So I could add every single one of these different outcomes up. And if you add them up, there's 36 total outcomes in this table. So we've now been introduced to a couple of different ways of showing our different outcomes. We have our tree diagram. We also have our table. Now to show guys with our table, this was 2 spinners. If say we wanted a smaller scale, and I want to do the table with my 2 coins here. Again, on the row that's going across, list off your one set of outcomes, heads or tails. My second quarter, those outcomes are also heads and tails, and then I can begin creating my table. So heads, heads, tails, heads, heads, tails, tails, tails. And again, by doing this table, these 4 options are the same 4 that I just made in my sample space, and I can count these up. So 1, 2, 3, 4, and there's my 4 outcomes. So it still shows with your table all the same outcomes that you would have got by doing a tree diagram. So just kind of a couple ways of seeing that. Alright, last way you're going to see these sample spaces represented. And this one is through what we call an organized list. And in my opinion, the organized list, guys, is very similar to the table. So if I were to roll a dice, what are the different outcomes I could have with the dice? I could have a 1, a 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and so forth. With a coin, you could have what outcomes? Heads and tails. I'm going to pair up every one of my dice outcomes with every one of my coin outcomes. So, for example, I would have 1 H. 1 for the number on the dice, H for heads. I could have 2H. I could have 3H. And notice we're just making a list of all the different outcomes possible with this scenario. Now, I went through and I finished with heads. Now I'm going to go through with tails. So 1T, 2T, all the way till I get to 6T. And there you go. I've listed out all my options. And the only reason, guys, the only way this is separated from doing the table is that with the table, I listed off all my outcomes horizontally, I listed them all out vertically, and then I kind of like use these rows and columns to then come up with answers. So see, I want to see what C4 is. C and 4, kind of see where they meet. With the list, I'm just going through here listing off all the different outcomes that I had. So 1H, 2H, 3H, 4H, 5H, 6H, and then the same thing with the T's as well. 1T, 2T, 3T, and so forth into 6T. So these are your 3 different examples. You had your tree diagram, your table, and you also had your list. Let's look at number 3, and let's see if we can maybe put a tree diagram together with number 3. So with my tree diagram, I roll a dice. How many options do I have with the dice? I could roll a 1, a 2, 3, 4, 5, or 6. And then I want to branch off of those. So if I rolled a 1, well, maybe I then flipped the coin, I would have got heads or tails. Same thing with a 2. Maybe if I rolled a 2, I flipped the coin and then got heads or tails. And then the same thing with 3. And the same thing with 4. And so forth until you've gone through all of your options. Now, the last thing that we haven't gone through with this last organized list is my total outcomes. So it's going to ask you how many outcomes are there in this organized list. This one's easy. Just like with the table, count them up. So when I count them up, there should be 12 outcomes. You can also see that through your tree diagram. Count up all the last ones. So I have 1H, 1T, 2H, 2T. And those should sound familiar because look, 1H, 1H, 1T, 1T. Same thing with 2H, 2H, 2T, 2T. You just find them in different spots, but guys, those orders and those pairs are still together regardless on if you use the list, a tree diagram, or a table. So again, my 12 options, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. I still have 12 outcomes, so I'm still going to get the exact same answer regardless of which way or which form I use. Pay attention to your instructions. They're all going to be different when you get your homework on this, guys. Make sure you do whatever it's asking for. Alright? Hope you enjoyed the video. Thanks, guys. Miss seeing every one of you. Have a good night.